Well, many minds have been on coronavirus 24/7. It's hard to remember sometimes that this year is also an election year. So our very own Kari Lake with Fox 10 Phoenix is interviewing an expert about how elections are being affected in a time of coronavirus. We have that interview for you right here on News Now.
I'm Kari Lake with Fox 10 Phoenix, and I'm joined by Stan Barnes, a former Arizona State Senator and a current political consultant. Stan, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure, Kari.
So we're going to talk about how the pandemic, COVID-19, is affecting the political races out there. It's something that 6 months ago, nobody would have ever predicted, planned for, or even considered as they moved forward in their election planning. Where does this fall? You've never seen anything like it, I'm sure, in your time.
Right, I haven't. Not only is this a black swan event for our personal lives, our economic lives, but it is of that magnitude for the political world as well. And you're asking the question that everyone in my business and every candidate and every incumbent is asking themselves in the midst of this global pandemic and the national and state response and what it's done to our economy, what it's done to voters, what it's done to individual people, what will happen in November because of it. And of course, the truth is we're guessing, we're making educated guesses, but the first educated guess that I think is more or less a consensus guess among those of us who think we know things like this is that it will benefit incumbent office holders for a variety of reasons, but that's the coming out response is that if you're in office already, you're benefited from this circumstance when it comes to election day.
Why is that? Is it because when people are in crisis mode, they don't want to add another kind of unknown to a change that they don't have to add? Why is that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that don't change horses in the middle of the stream thinking that you're articulating, and that's true. But I think it might be more this logic that in order to defeat an incumbent office holder, you generally, as a challenger, have to make your case. You have to say, why not this guy who's already in office? And challengers are now disadvantaged in this new world order because, after all, raising money is more difficult. Reaching out to voters is different and probably more difficult. And that personal touch that would be going on right now is not going on. And so the ability of the challenger to go forward in the process and make the case that they are better than the status quo, the person that's already there, is hampered. On top of that, incumbents have generally a natural advantage anyway, because they have generally more name identification and they generally raise more money and they have a built-in constituency that's already voted for them and knows them. So you combine that natural advantage with this idea that people's mind, voters' mind, is not on the election, and incumbents get even more advantage.
Now, we say this here in the end of April, as we're doing this interview. Things are moving so quickly. Every day there seems to be more news. Is there anything that could change or really shake things up further that would be an unknown, like another black swan that you could see happening?
One is not good enough for you? One every 100 years?
Well, I mean, we're looking at, if we're looking at the national races, we have candidate, former Vice President Joe Biden, and he's trying to campaign the best he can from home. And then you have, situation with accusations of sexual abuse from him on a former staffer. There's all kinds of things like that. Could that change? You're hearing maybe another candidate could step in. Who could his VP be? All of these things. Could any of those kind of really blow up and become the story or a bigger story?
Yes, I think you're onto something. And while you're at it, I think it's wise to keep in mind that everything I said previous about incumbent advantage and all that does not apply to the President of the United States or that office. At least I don't think it applies in the same one-for-one way I meant it for statewide offices, state legislators, local officials, that sort of thing. Everyone in the United States has an opinion about Donald Trump. Everyone, and so that phenomenon is less invasive to voter thinking because they already know where they are on the president. And then there's all these other issues that will come. So you've identified it. The country falls into two big camps: those that love the president and those that don't. And there's a very small group in the middle somehow that are open to voting either way. And what Joe Biden does is going to matter a lot. And who he chooses for vice president is going to matter. But the point you're making, a scandal we're not anticipating, or one maybe that we might be anticipating with the vice president's recent troubles, the former vice president recent trouble, that kind of thing would have a dramatic effect on it. I mean, after all the country went through with the Supreme Court nominations by the president and the accusations there, if it's shown with some credibility that Joe Biden himself has these problems, then plug that into the equation because it's going to be understood and known by voters.
Is it possible to kind of reverse course or change course this far in with this many delegates kind of already assigned to certain candidates? Could people just say, we want to change course, or could Vice President Biden himself say, I think this or that, and does he have any say in it, basically?
Yeah, fair enough. And normally that would almost be a ridiculous question, but today it's a very appropriate question. And the short answer is yes. If Joe Biden ends up having a fatal flaw of some sort, then when Democrats gather at their convention, they have all the power they need as party leadership and the rules of the party, et cetera, to make a change. In fact, it's been part of Joe Biden's problem, is that even while he looks like he's stumbling mentally and is not quite there, and even people that are not partisan are starting to talk about it, and Governor Cuomo in New York, Democratic Governor Cuomo in New York, is shining brightly as somebody that looks competent in doing things. There's been talk about replacing Joe Biden with Andrew Cuomo, and the talk is real only because it's possible. It is possible. So who knows?
Is it like legally possible through the rules that they have set up to do something like that? And how would that go? Hypothetically, how would they do that?
Yeah, I don't think it's certainly not a legal issue, but as you say, the rules of the Democratic Party are such that I'm not positive there is a rulemaking pathway to it. But what I am positive about is that the party can do what it wants to do if they have enough people at leadership that agree it's the right thing to do. The problem for Democrats won't be so much the rules, it will be the perception that they are running over their own people, those people who showed up at polls in different states along the way. It won't be everyone on the Democratic side of the aisle that thinks, you're right, we need to get rid of Joe Biden and replace him with someone else. There'll be a lot of people say, we voted for him, he needs to stay, that's the way it is. So their divided family problem will be the real political problem. I mean, after all, you cannot beat Donald Trump with a divided Democratic Party. So their main issue is to keep themselves united around somebody. Right now, it's Joe Biden. It's probably going to be Joe Biden, but there is a theoretical chance if things get really bad for him on the sexual allegation, or if his health is not what it could be, they could replace the guy.
Okay, on the Republican side, economy is not even close to what it was, and we don't know where it's going. There's been a lot of criticism of President Trump that he didn't maybe respond as he should have, depending on who you talk to. Is the president at risk, or how much risk is he facing going into this election?
Yeah, fair enough. I think the president all in wished, just from a political point of view, a raw political point of view, that this did not happen. Forget the health and the economy and everything else. Just, it's not the kind of thing you want to have happen, because the crisis is unpredictable politically. It can go any way. I think the president was looking forward to riding into November with the world's greatest economy, the lowest unemployment numbers, all things great, because that's what gets presidents reelected. Now we are in a unknown zone where the government itself has collapsed the economy. in the name of public health. No president in the United States has ever done that. And in the heels of the Trump economy, which everyone was loving, and made the president look like he was unbeatable. Now we really don't know. Now, will the American people say this is President Trump's fault, how this was handled, the virus itself, et cetera? Or will they say, here comes this black swan event from China or somewhere else overseas, and the president did all he could to keep us healthy and balanced economically? And your viewers are just as qualified to make that guess as I am. But I think you can bet that the president wished we weren't doing this just for raw political purpose.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the statewide races as we go down. I mean, right now I'm still seeing a lot of ads playing, and you have a lot of captive viewers at home. They're stuck at home right now. So yeah. The ads that are playing right now, I would assume, are almost a little bit more valuable because there's so many eyeballs at home staring at the TV or on their computers.
Yeah, that's a fair assumption.
Does it get harder as the economy opens to when people start to go, all right, we can get out now, to get their attention? How would you handle it if you were a candidate right now trying to sway a vote? Yeah,
right. You're actually got your finger on the most compelling problem of all campaign consultants. Is we used to be able to broadcast television and reach almost everyone. Now you're not reaching the majority if you're just simply on television. So chasing eyeballs and attention is where it is at. And as you know, and your viewers know, it's migrated a great deal to the social media structures, and that's why they've become so important. So as you said in your question, right now there's kind of a free pass. Everyone's at home, and a lot of people have their television on, watching television in the middle of the day when they normally are not. And so ads on daytime television, which are dirt cheap, are actually having more effect than they would normally. That's an important thing for campaign consultant. But the election's still far enough away, November, that there's going to be a lot of water under the bridge between now and then. The other phenomenon is the president of the United States and his opponent will have, combined with Martha McSally and Mark Kelly, will have so much money to spend on Arizona voters and outreach that it's going to feel like it swallows up all the other political advertising, so that a little state legislator or even someone running for the U.S. House in a congressional seat is going to have a hard time breaking through when everywhere you go, every bit of social media, every bit of broadcast and cable television will be Trump, Biden, McSally, Kelly, 24 hours a day.
There's going to be a lot of this.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I can't take it. That's the one thing when the elections are over, you're kind of thrilled that the ads have calmed down a little bit. Have we gotten to a point where we're so divided as a country that it used to be you would vote, just kind of go down the ballot and you vote kind of how you feel about each candidate? Have we gotten to it where it's more, if you're voting on this side, you're voting all the way down the ballot Democrat, or all the way down the ballot Republican? Are we seeing more of that now than we used to say 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I don't have any empirical evidence in my pocket, but all my gut instinct tells me you are right, that voters are more likely to say, you know what, I'm so mad at the Democrats, I'm voting all the Republicans, or the other way around, than they were 15 years ago. And Arizona is particularly famous for voters that are independent in spirit and go through the menu and choose, and are not most drawn by the party. But I feel like that is changing underneath us, and the polarization of the country, which I think even amateur political scientists can see is as bad as it's been probably all the way back to the Civil War, is leading to that kind of, you're either red or blue, and that's it. And there's very little thinking about I know that person, I like that person, they're not in my party, but there's no doubt some of that happens, but it's crowded by the first phenomenon, when candidates cannot get their message through because the big elephants are fighting, meaning the presidential and the U.S. Senate, and then there's all the other candidates trying to get through to voters. voters they will default as they go down the ballot to party rather than name ID, because they don't have any name ID to rely on.
So if you happen to be running in a year where the top of the ticket Republican is really strong right now, if Trump turns out to be strong and you're way down the ballot as a Republican, you may win just for being a Republican, and vice versa with the Democrats.
Yes, that's my theory. Yes, and in fact, I think if for instance the president ends up being strong in November in Arizona, I think that's going to be really good for Republicans. And what it might mean tangibly, right here at the state legislative level, is that Democrats will not get a majority of either the state House or the state Senate, even though most Democrats serving in the legislature think they are going to be in the majority for the first time since 1966.
Wow.
In Arizona, in the state House, because they believe the public momentum is with them. But the phenomena we're discussing, if the president is strong, if voters are not exposed to local campaigns because either the money can't penetrate that fog of presidential and U.S. Senate candidates, then that's going to hurt Democrat chances for overturning the incumbent Republicans.
What's your guess on, and you have an educated guess, for me it would just be a guess, on the independents in our state? You mentioned how very large that group is. Are they truly independent? I meet so few people who are kind of, well, this or that. I feel like everybody I meet is either 100% that way or 100% that way.
Yeah, a lot of folks you meet that you're describing, when they say they're this way or that way, they still may be registered as non-affiliated. Right now in the state of Arizona, about a third of voters are registered Republican. Just under that are registered Democrat. And right in that same space is the whole rest of everybody that's not Republican, not Democrat, not affiliated. That's the person we think of as independent, right?
But are they?
But are they? That's your question. And historically, and I think it still holds, independent people registered as independents or not affiliated lean conservative. They lean Republican. They are center right in their political feeling. They register that way because they are mad at one of the two parties for whatever reason, and they theoretically, symbolically want to free themselves, even though they can always vote for anyone they want, but they want to free themselves to either tell their spouse, their neighbor, their kids, or themselves in the mirror, I'm registered not with the parties. But they haven't left their politics behind. It's still with them. And in Arizona, most of Arizona is center right in our thinking. And I believe that's where we are today, even in 2020.
Do you have any polling information that you've seen recently that's kind of surprised you, where, because you've seen a lot, a lot about how politics works, but do you ever see a poll where you go, this surprises me, and it has everything to do with the times in which we're living?
Yeah, I've been ongoing surprised at the McSally, Mark Kelly polling. Every single poll has Mark Kelly ahead by a measurable distance, 5 points or more. Mm-hmm. And I just don't see it, feel it on the ground, even though I talk to a lot of people in politics, Republican and Democrat and not registered. It's just amazing to me that Mark Kelly continually polls out with what amounts to a substantial polling lead this early in that U.S. Senate race. I am so skeptical about it. And I think we are all suffering from watching the polling of 2016 be so wrong at the highest level that it's infected my own thinking about it. I just don't trust them anymore, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Well, and that's a good point, because we all kind of got surprised by the polls, and many times are surprised by the polls. Yes. We're thinking it's going one way and it goes the other way. Are they reliable? You hear some people who don't believe them. Is there a way to kind of work a poll to make your point of view prevail, or are they, for the most part, on the up and up?
Well, different pollsters behave differently, but it's naive to think that pollsters don't want to please the people paying for the poll, and generally polls will reflect some version of what the person paying for the poll wants to see. That's just, I guess, human nature. I don't know what it is, but that's my experience is you can buy a poll to say about whatever you want to say. And if you want to use that poll for political rhetoric, campaign purposes, look how far ahead I am. Look, a poll was done. I mean, that's an old trick in all of politics, including Arizona politics. So it's good to have a healthy skepticism of every poll. The thing you can normally rely on is that consistency in a variety of polls that are all going the same direction is telling you something. When different polls over time are all pointing toward one direction, then you can bet that's where the electorate's going. And we just haven't seen that yet in Arizona.
That you see the trend line kind of going up.
Right.
Well, we're about to, and this is being recorded before the governor speaks about what he's going to do when it comes to Arizona. Are we going to open up? Are we going to ease into opening up? So for people watching, this is being recorded before the governor makes his move. How will the governor's way he handles all of this affect our statewide elections and more local type elections?
I think it does have impact because voters are human beings that vote with their heart and not necessarily with their head. And they are watching the governor and they're looking at their own job. They're looking at family members and they're personalizing the whole experience. And if this has been a trying your trying experience, but your perception is it was necessary, and the governor has been steady-handed with it, reluctantly doing what he's doing in the name of preserving human lives, even while trying to keep the economy going. This is going to be a net positive for Republicans and for the governor, et cetera. If your viewpoint is the other way around, it's going to be a net negative. I think most Arizonans think Governor Ducey's done a good job with it, given the really bad set of playing cards he's been handed, and so my own estimation is he's not going to suffer from it politically. He doesn't face voters anyway, but the Republican legislature is related to this. They do face voters this year. I think they won't suffer because of it.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at. He's not up for re-election. Right. He can politically do what he wants, make a choice that doesn't really affect him. But you do think it could affect the other Republicans running in the state, or that their opponents could use the governor's management style against other Republicans.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say at the front of it, is that the voters blend it all together like a mosaic, and they don't necessarily separate Doug Ducey, the governor, from Republican legislators doing something different. And for that matter, Republican legislators are going to come back into session this coming Friday, May 1st. And if they do, when they do, what they do then might have more impact than what the governor is doing, because they might go back and take up bills and pick up right where they left off. Or they might just end the regular session and look toward a special session to deal with budget items and COVID relief. But what they do is going to be used by their opponents in November. In the most negative way. And so they're all keenly knowledgeable that their actions right now are super focused by their opponents and their constituencies that pay attention.
Finally, I want to ask you, Stan, you've been watching what's happening. You're watching it in the backdrop with the pandemic. Is there anything you've seen a candidate, whether it be on a local level, state, national, do that you really commend and go, well, that was actually brilliant politically? Or just the opposite, or that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen politically? Yeah. Give me your perception.
Yeah, right here in Arizona, I think Doug Ducey strategically has hit it just right. And what I mean is he's acted moderately and always under the imprimatur of what the federal government is recommending. And for a Republican governor to say, we're doing it at the advice of, or the counsel of, federal guidelines, that could be a dangerous kind of play for a Republican governor, except the guy in the White House is a Republican. And it's one way for this Republican governor to take Republican business owners and make them feel like he's doing as best he can because he's actually following the lead of the guy in the White House. And everyone in the Republican side you own your own small business, you're entrepreneurial, et cetera, or you're an employee of the same spirit, you vote Republican, you don't want to take the economy down, but you also want to be rational and reasonable. And Doug Ducey's behavior, while always pointing at the federal advice, I think has been, from just a pure political point of view, great, because of the way it plays both sides at the same time. He's doing what he's supposed to do, at the same time reminding voters, look, the conservative guy in the White House says this is what we ought to do. So we're doing it that way.
Interesting. Okay. Stan Barnes, always interesting to talk to you. Got great perspective, and, anything could happen. As we
anything can and will.
Anything will happen. Let's check in again, hopefully soon. Thanks, Stan.
Okay. Great, Kari. Thank you.
And thank you again once more to our very own Fox 10 Phoenix's Kari Lake for